Okay, let's move on to the addendum concerning the right to terminate due to the lender's appraisal. So this was created to address the situation where parties want to have a special contingency based on the appraisal performed by the lender. 3 options are available on this addendum. The first box basically gives the buyer no out on, okay, let me do that again. The first box has the buyer giving up the right to terminate based on the appraised value. So regardless of the appraised value, if it's less than the sales price, the buyer is going to be bringing in the difference between the appraised value and the sales price in this instance. With box 2, it's basically the same as box 1, except the parties can put a limit or a floor on how much lower the appraisal can drop to trigger the buyer's obligation to come up with additional cash at closing. So the example that we have here is if the contract purchase price is $350 and the buyer is willing to bring up to $20,000 over appraised value, if the appraise is less than the sales price, then what you would see in that blank is $330. So that's the floor that the buyer wants to have to still be able to terminate under the third-party financing addendum. If the appraisal comes in at $330 or more, then the buyer is bringing that additional cash up to $350. If the appraisal comes in under $330, the buyer can terminate and receive their earnest money back. They don't have to terminate. They can also bring in additional cash, or it may be a time when the seller and the buyer get together and try to renegotiate. But they can terminate. The third box allows the buyer to set a certain amount that they do not want to go forward with the transaction if the property appraises under a certain amount. So whatever figure that is, in our example here, the buyer wants to have the opportunity to terminate the contract if the property appraises at $345 or below. So in that instance, even if it meets lender approval and the appraisal comes in below $345, the buyer can terminate the contract and receive their earnest money back. In that situation, though, they will need to provide a copy of the appraisal to the seller to show them proof of that. So when will each box most likely be used? Box 1 is going to be used when the buyer is either fairly confident of the appraised value of the property or they're willing to bring in the additional cash regardless. Box 2 is most likely going to be used in the same type of conditions as box 1, but the buyer wants to place a limit on how much extra cash he's willing to commit to close the transaction. And with box 3, that's when the buyer wants to have the ability to terminate the contract if the property appraises below a certain amount, period.